Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Host Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Cuba to give more scholarships to young women in Antigua and Barbuda going forward. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Tuesday, 11th April 2023. Details when we return.
Hubbard's Motor Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies Compound in Grand Anse, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
Welcome back. Cuba is considering providing more scholarships to women in Antigua and Barbuda to pursue careers in male-dominated fields. The revelation comes from Cuba's new ambassador to Antigua and Barbuda, Sergio Pastrana, during an exclusive interview with ABS's Garfield Burford.
The Republic of Cuba has been one of Antigua and Barbuda's closest bilateral partners. Cuba has shared its tremendous progress in health and education with the rest of the Caribbean, with many people in this country receiving scholarships to study medicine and other fields in the Western Caribbean nation. Cuba's new ambassador to Antigua and Barbuda, Sergio Pastrana, now wants to take it even further.
One thing that we've been considering is the possibility to have more scholarship for girls in those areas in which traditionally the men have been predominant, because the society is made of men and women. And this is something that we will try to strengthen.
He says these areas include engineering and agronomy. I asked Ambassador Pastrana when this strategic increase in scholarships to females in these targeted areas will become a reality.
We should start with the next year. This year is already in the works. We're already over the first quarter of the year. So we must try and increase these areas for the next year of the usual providing of scholarship to Antiguan and Barbudan students in Cuba.
In more matters of education, Ambassador Pastrana also expects closer collaboration with the University of the West Indies Five Islands campus. It is an area close to his heart, as he has a background with the National Academy of Sciences in Cuba. Meanwhile, Ambassador Pastrana thanks the government and the people of this country for their support in the face of the embargo imposed by the United States.
We must say that the relations between both our countries have been excellent. And I must say that I ratified to the government and the representatives of the Antiguan and Barbudan society that I've met so far, that our commitment is to really maintain this level of cooperation and strengthen and even increase it wherever possible.
Before being posted to Antigua and Barbuda, he served as Cuba's ambassador to Barbados.
The Labour administration in St. Lucia has come under fire from United Workers' Party political leader Alan Chastany for not investing more in the economic development of Vieux Fort. Chastany thinks this would be a better way to remedy the upsurge in crime in the south. Zane Romulus of the DBS News World reports.
UWP leader Alan Chastany believes the town of Vieux Fort is being snubbed by the current SLP administration. The interventions which have been outlined in the debate on the estimates of revenue and expenditure to deal with the South's social and economic issues, he points out, are simply not enough.
For anyone to suggest that $3.5 to $5 million can solve the problem in Vieux Fort has to be delusional. And I think that speaks to why Vieux Fort has found itself. I'm now absolutely convinced the Labour Party is not able to see a bigger picture, cannot figure out how to intertwine, link the economy and social progress in this country. So when you want to talk about how do you solve the problems in Vieux Fort, you think some paint and cleaning up the place is going to solve that problem?
The acute problem of joblessness and economic stagnation, Chastney observes, have plagued Vieux-Fort and the South for some time. To address this, he says it will take major investments, hence the policy direction his administration took when it was in office.
So remember, this is a government that when we were pushing DSH, and we use the word DSH, but we don't break it down. Horse racing track, casino, apartment developments, shopping mall, hotels, university, and residential area. That's just at the Beau-Saint-Just site. Then you had the Il Pirata site, which was going to be a home port terminal with retail and residential and commercial space. And then you had what we were going to do at Sandy Beach in terms of subdividing the land to create a tourism park, to create an opportunity for St. Lucians to buy a piece of beachfront land and smaller properties. So even a more successful model than what's taken place at Rodney Bay. An international airport. A hospital that was not just for domestic use, but an international hospital to encourage more investment into the Vieux-Fort area. Water, road developments. The call centers. Right? Ojo Labs came in. I mean, when I hear this government continue to want to question Ojo Labs, really, young people making $3,500 a month, some of them making as much as $7,500 a month, and being involved in the most cutting-edge industry in the world.
The UWP leader is convinced that his administration had the interests of the 7 residents at heart more than the current Philip Pierre-led administration.
Are you kidding me that this government, and particularly Alva Baptist, Musa, and Kenny, have not stood up in cabinet to demand that the cruise ship port be built in Vieux-Fort? I mean, the same man who wants to talk about how the port is empty, to know that cargo may not be the way to go moving forward, but certainly cruise ships. Somebody has to explain to you why diversifying away from Castries in the cruise ship market and allowing that to go into Vieux-Fort is a good thing. If we want to beat gangs in this country, we cannot do it by the law. We have to give the young people of this country an alternative that they can see that they can own a home, they can travel, they can raise families on. Once we prove that to them, that is when it's going to happen.
For the DBS News World, I am Zane Romulus.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Customs officials in the Bahamas are hoping to make $10 million from new app. More in this ZNS News item.
Meantime, one of the country's main money makers is hoping to rake in over $1 billion in revenue this fiscal period. And according to Customs Superintendent James Albury, $10 million of that will be collected from his department's recently launched Baggage Declarations app.
The exam app is doing for the Customs Department is giving us accurate revenue collections. And with that accurate revenue collections is that we are actually having better duty rates from all of our selection of the commodities that actually come into the country.
On Thursday, the International Court of Justice ruled rejecting Venezuela's preliminary objection to Guyana's request for a final and binding decision on the land boundary dispute settled by the October 3rd, 1899 arbitral award between the two South American nations. HGP's Tiana Cole has more information on this development.
On Thursday, the International Court of Justice handed down its ruling in the case between Guyana and Venezuela on Venezuela's objection in the court's jurisdiction. The court rejected Venezuela's objection and upheld its jurisdiction to decide the case by a vote of 14-1. This means the court will now proceed to decide the dispute between the two states on the merits and ultimately issue a final and binding determination on the validity of the 1899 arbitral award that fixed the land boundary between Venezuela and the then British Guyana. Venezuela and the United Kingdom recognized the validity of the arbitral award and its resulting international boundary for more than 60 years. Upon its independence in 1966, Guyana also recognized the award of the boundary, but Venezuela changed its position and began claiming more than two-thirds of Guyana's territory west of the Essequibo River. This is the second time the International Court has rejected jurisdictional objection raised by Venezuela. In December 2020, the court overruled Venezuela's objection by a vote of 12-4. In June 2022, Venezuela raised a new objection. Oral hearings were held in November 2022, during which both parties appeared and presented their arguments before the court. Thursday's ruling disposed of the objection and will require Venezuela to submit its written pleadings on the merit of the case. This is on the validity of the arbitral award and the international boundary that is established. Following the ruling, President Irfan Ali said Guyana remains confident that its long-standing international boundary with Venezuela will be confirmed by the court.
Guyana has always been fully committed to the peaceful resolution of the dispute with its neighbor and sister republic in accordance with international law.
The president reminded that after failing to achieve a diplomatic settlement through talks mediated by United Nations Secretary General, over more than 2 decades, Guyana brought the matter to the International Court of Justice for a final and binding determination. Meanwhile, the APNU-AFC noted that with the court's rejection of Venezuela's preliminary objections, the way has now been cleared for the ICJ to adjudicate on the merits of the case, in pursuit of a final and binding judgment on the matter. Tiana Ko reporting for the HGP Nightly News.
The 3-member committee appointed by the Prime Minister to repatriate Trinidad and Tobago nationals from Syria continues to provide information to government to bring them home through a phased repatriation. TTT News has more.
The 3-member committee appointed by the Prime Minister to repatriate TNT nationals from Syria continues to provide information to government to bring the nationals home through a phased repatriation. Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Dr. Amory Brown, gave an update on Thursday.
That's different to the role of the Nightingale team, which is a multidisciplinary team with some strong composition from the Ministry of National Security, the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, which has been looking at the overall framework. There's work still going on the legislative framework.
Questions around Chaguanas West MP Dinesh Rambali's quest to go to Syria on a fact-finding mission were posed to the minister. Dr. Brown cautioned against any attempts by an individual to go to Syria.
As a fellow citizen myself, I would be very concerned about any individual attempts to go off into a challenging part of the world in a manner that may not be properly planned or well supported. In the endeavors that we are undertaking, there is coordination with the government of Turkey, the government of Syria, the International Committee of the Red Cross.
A civil rights group in the UK urged the authorities there, under the new Prime Minister, to follow through on promises made to thousands of people of Caribbean descent who were wrongly targeted as illegal migrants in the so-called Windrush scandal that emerged 5 years ago. More in this HGP Nightly News item with Renata Burnett.
The Black Equity Organization submitted a petition signed by more than 50,000 people that criticized the painfully slow response by the government and the decision by Home Secretary Suella Braverman to scrape several recommendations for immigration agency improvements that her predecessor accepted. We urge your government to stick to the promises made. There is still an opportunity to show that you and your ministers are serious about righting past wrongs. A letter to Sunak said, and I quote, "To do anything less sends a clear message that the suffering of the Windrush generation was in vain and the hostile environment still exists," unquote. The group is named for the Empire Windrush, the ship that brought the first 500 Caribbean migrants to British shores in 1948 to help rebuild after World War II. Tens of thousands of migrants from the region who arrived legally in the UK until 1973 later found themselves facing a government crackdown on illegal migrants. Scores lost jobs, homes, and the right to free medical care because they did not have the paperwork to prove their status. Some were detained and others deported. After British news media uncovered the scandal in 2018, the government apologized and offered compensation, but the group said payments are inadequate for the harm done and the process is bureaucratic and overly complicated. And I quote, "It is unconscionable that some Windrush victims who should have been compensated died before their cases were resolved and payments made," unquote. The group said, and I quote, "Many others are still fighting to receive their payments," unquote.
Hubbards is once again innovating the way you shop with its new online store, providing 24-hour shopping convenience. You can shop now for appliances, hardware, houseware, building material, and more. Free delivery island-wide. Start shopping now at hubbardsHardware.gd. Safe, convenient, reliable.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.